The scent of whiskey and sandalwood always made Vivian's heart ache. It was his scent, Sebastian Caney's, the kind that lingered in the air every time he entered a room. She could smell it right now as she's standing in the Caney family's penthouse kitchen, helping Natalie prepare for her birthday party as a friend, when in truth she was only stealing glances at him through the open doorway. He stood in the middle of the invited guests, listening to a senator say something, his attention so sharply focused and cold that it sent butterflies fluttering in her stomach. "Vivian, hello, is anyone home?" Natalie waved a hand in front of her face, her brown eyes sparkling with amusement. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" Vivian asked too quickly, her cheeks already burning, staring at my brother like he's the last piece of chocolate cake at a weight loss camp. Natalie laughed, not unkindly. "How long has it been?" 5 years since I dragged you out of that shelter. Don't you think it's time? I don't know. To actually talk to him. He doesn't even know I exist," Vivian murmured, turning back to the wine glasses she was polishing. "I'm just the invisible friend of his little sister. No, I'm not even a friend in his eyes. I'm just his sister's best friend who's always around." It was true. In 5 years of knowing Natalie, her brother had looked Vivian straight in the eye exactly 4 times. 4 times in 5 years. She had counted. She had held on to each moment the way a hopelessly infatuated child would, even though she was 27 years old. Even though she had survived being orphaned, survived homelessness, survived even a blade that had nearly taken her life, and should have known better by now. Sebastian Caney was everything she should stay away from. Dangerous, cold, completely out of reach. He ran the Caney Empire, which everyone knew was a polite way of saying organized crime, even if no one dared to put it into words. He was also absurdly handsome, the kind of handsome that made women lose their minds, with a jawline that looked carved from stone, eyes the gray of a winter storm, a faint scar through his left eyebrow that only made him look more dangerous, and a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than a full year of her rent, and he treated her like furniture. Vivian had watched him charm politicians, threaten rivals with nothing but a look, and lead dozens of glamorous women who clung to his arm like expensive accessories. And her, she received only distant politeness, the kind of politeness people reserved for the one pouring the wine. Her phone buzzed in her dress pocket. A notification from the dating app. Jonathan Pierce, 34 years old, an attorney, wanted to know if she was free for dinner on Saturday. He was attractive in a safe way, decent, courteous. Exactly the kind of man Vivian needed if she was ever going to get past this foolish obsession with Sebastian Caney. She tapped yes before she could think. She did not know that from the other side of the room, storm gray eyes were tracking her every movement, not missing a single second. If you want to know the secret Sebastian has kept hidden for 5 years, hit like to support the channel. Share this video with anyone who loves fiery love stories. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. Vivian's studio apartment sat on the 4th floor of an aging building on Maple Street, a place where the rusted fire escape clung to the bricks and the hallway lights flickered as if they might die at any moment. She climbed the worn-down steps one by one, her legs aching after 6 hours on her feet, the smell of leftover food and sweat still clinging to her wrinkled white shirt. When she opened the door to apartment 4B, she was greeted by the familiar creak and the faint, stale dampness rising from peeling walls. The studio was only about 20 square meters, just enough space for a single bed pushed against the wall, a small kitchen with 2 old gas burners, and a cramped bathroom where the faucet dripped all night long. No sofa. No dining table. Only a plastic chair by the window where Vivian would sit with coffee on the rare mornings she had off. The ceiling held a yellowed stain from the time the upstairs pipe burst, something the landlord had never bothered to fix. This was everything she could afford on a barista's wages by day and office cleaning at night. Vivian let herself fall onto the bed and stared up at the ceiling in the unsteady darkness, streetlight seeping through the thin curtains. She thought about the Caney family's penthouse, where even a decorative flower on a table was probably worth more than an entire month of her rent. She thought about Sebastian standing among the powerful, radiating the kind of authority that made people lower their eyes. And then she thought about herself, the girl standing by her best friend's side, occasionally helping with the guests, yet feeling as invisible as a ghost drifting through glittering parties. She took off her shirt to change into sleepwear, and her gaze accidentally caught on the long scar, nearly 6 inches, running from her left hip up toward her ribs. The skin was puckered and pale pink, a permanent reminder of the nightmare 5 years ago. Her fingers traced the scar, and the memories surged back like floodwater. At 16, Vivian lost both her father and her mother in a truck accident on the highway. They had been driving home after a parent-teacher meeting for her, their old sedan no match for an out-of-control 18-wheeler. She got the news while she was doing homework in the living room, waiting for her parents to come back so she could show them her math test score. The police knocked at 9 that night. Her life changed forever in a single sentence. Uncle Thomas, her father's younger brother, became her legal guardian. He quickly took all of the life insurance money, the money that should have belonged to Vivian's future. For 2 years in his house, she endured coldness, cruel remarks, and the constant feeling that she was an unwanted burden. On her 18th birthday, Uncle Thomas set a suitcase outside her bedroom door and told her she was an adult now, no longer his responsibility. Vivian walked out of that house with a small suitcase, $300, and not a single person in the world to lean on. She drifted through cheap motels until the money ran out, and then ended up in a homeless shelter on the edge of the city. Nights on a hard bunk bed, listening to coughing and the muffled crying of other broken lives, she would wonder whether there was anything left worth waiting for. And then that night happened. 5 years ago, when she was 22, she was on her way back to the shelter after a late shift at a restaurant. A dark alley, fast footsteps, a shadow lunging from a blind corner. She did not see the knife, only felt the tearing pain in her side as the mugger snatched her cheap handbag, the one that held exactly $20 in tip money. She went down on the freezing pavement, warm blood slipping through her fingers, the world slowly sinking into black. The last thing she remembered before she passed out was the squeal of brakes and a low voice ordering someone to call an ambulance. She woke in the hospital 3 days later, not knowing who had saved her, not knowing who had paid the enormous hospital bill she never could have afforded. The nurse only said there had been an anonymous benefactor. Vivian never found out who it was. Even now, the scar reminded her that life was never generous to people like her. Her phone vibrated, pulling her out of the painful current of memory. A message from Jonathan Pierce, the attorney she had matched with on the dating app. He asked what she liked to eat, Italian or French, as if she were the kind of woman who dined regularly in elegant restaurants. Vivian smiled bitterly and typed back that he could decide. Maybe it was time she let something ordinary into a life crowded with the extraordinary. The next morning, Vivian woke with dark circles under her eyes and a dull, lingering ache along the old scar. She dragged herself to the Blue Moon Cafe, where she worked 6 days a week for wages that were just enough to cover rent and buy food from one day to the next. By her lunch break, her phone buzzed with a message from Natalie, asking if she wanted to meet for afternoon tea. Vivian agreed at once, because Natalie Kane was the only person in the world who made her feel not entirely alone. They met at a small tea shop near Natalie's gallery, a place the Kane girl often visited to stay far from the family's underworld. When Vivian saw Natalie walk in wearing a light floral dress and a radiant smile, she was pulled back to the first day they had met, 5 years ago, in circumstances she never wanted to speak about again. That day, Vivian had just left the hospital after a life-saving surgery, her body still weak and her spirit in pieces. She went back to the shelter because she had nowhere else to go, lay on the familiar bunk bed, and wondered if life was punishing her for some sin from a previous lifetime. Then Natalie appeared, a young girl with warm brown eyes, rubber gloves on her hands, and a simple t-shirt, volunteering in a program that handed out food to the homeless. She stopped at Vivian's bed, saw the bandage that still bled through the fabric, and instead of looking at her with pity the way so many others did, Natalie asked one simple question. "Do you want an extra serving of soup?" "Mine, I'm not hungry." Vivian refused, but Natalie still left the bowl of soup beside her bed before walking away. The next day, she came back, and the day after that, and the day after that. Slowly, brief conversations turned into long, quiet talks, and Vivian realized that Natalie Kane, the daughter of one of the most powerful families in the city, was also the most sincere person she had ever met. Natalie never asked about Vivian's past, never judged her circumstances, simply stayed there, listened, and let her know that she deserved to be treated like a human being. 3 months later, when Vivian had fully recovered, Natalie pulled her out of the shelter and helped her find her first job, a barista position at a cafe owned by someone Natalie knew. She also lent Vivian the deposit money for the miserable little studio she was living in, the money Vivian had taken 2 years to pay back in full. From then on, Natalie became her closest friend, the older sister Vivian had never had, and also the only thread tying her to Sebastian Kane's world. "What are you thinking about? You look like you're heading to a funeral." Natalie's voice pulled Vivian back to the present. The Kane girl was sipping chamomile tea, her eyes curious as they studied her friend. Vivian hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell the truth. "I have a date, this Saturday, with a man named Jonathan Pierce." Natalie nearly choked on her tea. "Wait, what did you just say?" "You, Vivian Cole, The woman who has turned down every invitation for the past 5 years is finally going out with a man. Natalie set her cup down, her eyes bright. Tell me, who is he? What does he do? Is he handsome? Where did you meet him? Vivian could not stop herself from smiling at her friend's excitement. A lawyer, 34, met him on a dating app. He seems fine, polite, safe. Safe. Natalie repeated the word with clear amusement. That sounds like you're choosing a car, not a man to date. Maybe I need safe. Vivian looked down into her tea. Maybe I need something normal. Natalie went quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. If that's what you want, I support you. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters. But in Natalie's eyes, Vivian caught a flicker of worry, as if she were hiding something. Vivian did not ask, and Natalie did not say. They continued talking about lighter things, but the atmosphere had shifted in a subtle way. Vivian did not know that the moment she left the tea shop, Natalie would place a call to her brother, her voice tight with strain. Sebastian, we need to talk. About Vivian. Sebastian Kane's office sat on the top floor of Kane Tower, a vast space of glass walls that looked out over the entire city, furnished in minimalist lines and dark walnut wood. He sat behind a massive desk, his steel-gray eyes sweeping over the photographs spread across its surface. A picture of a man, 34 years old, brown hair neatly combed, wearing a gray suit, a smile so polished it looked manufactured. Jonathan Pierce, a lawyer, and the man who had dared to schedule a date with the woman Sebastian had silently protected for 5 years. Marcus Chen stood across from him, a tablet in hand, his voice as even as a weather report. Jonathan Pierce, Harvard Law graduate, working at Morrison and Clark for 7 years. Clean record, no criminal history, stable income, owns an apartment on the Upper East Side. On the surface, he's the perfect man. On the surface, Sebastian repeated, his voice ice cold, and underneath, Marcus swiped the tablet and brought up a new series of images. We have been following him for the past 2 days on your orders. Last night, Pierce met someone at a bar on 53rd Street. That person was Viktor Petrov. Sebastian lifted his head, his gaze darkening. Petrov. Dmitry Volkov's right hand. Exactly. Marcus nodded. The meeting lasted approximately 45 minutes. We couldn't hear what was said, but Pierce received an envelope from Petrov before he left. Dmitry Volkov. The name tightened Sebastian's jaw. Volkov was the Kaine family's sworn enemy, a Russian kingpin who had been trying to push into the Eastern Territory for the past decade. He was cunning, ruthless, and would not hesitate to use any method to bring Sebastian down, including getting close to the people around him. Dig deeper, Sebastian ordered, his voice stripped of emotion. I want everything about the connection between Pierce and Volkov. Every call, every transaction, every step he takes. And Marcus, he paused, storm-gray eyes flashing with danger. He does not get near her. Marcus nodded, not needing to ask who she was. He had worked for Sebastian long enough to know. Understood, sir. When Marcus left, Sebastian turned back to the windows, his reflection in the glass like a cold stone statue. But inside him, a storm was roaring. Vivian Cole. That name had haunted him for 5 years. Ever since the night he had found her on the sidewalk, blood everywhere, her breath as weak as a candle about to go out. He remembered that night with brutal clarity. He had been on his way home after a late meeting, the car cutting through a dark alley off Maple Street, and he saw her, a small figure lying motionless on the ground, blood spreading into a dark pool beneath the streetlight. His driver had intended to keep going, but Sebastian had ordered him to stop. He did not know why. He only knew he could not leave her there. He lifted her into the car, felt the fragile body shivering in his arms, and for the first time in years, Sebastian Kane felt fear. Not fear of blood, not fear of death. Fear that this nameless girl would die before he could get her to a hospital. He held her through the entire drive, one hand pressed hard against the bleeding wound, his mouth whispering words he could no longer remember. She survived, and from that night on, Sebastian could not stop thinking about her. He paid every hospital bill without leaving a name. He hired someone to investigate her, learned about the orphaned past, the uncle who threw her out, the years in the shelter. He arranged for her to get work at a cafe owned by an acquaintance, through Natalie, without Vivian ever knowing. He had her watched every day, making sure no one could hurt her again. He did all of it from the shadows, never once stepping closer, never letting her know he existed, because Sebastian knew himself. He was darkness. He was violence. He was everything a girl like Vivian should stay away from. He had promised Natalie, promised himself, that he would keep his distance. that he would protect her from afar and never touch her. But now Jonathan Pierce had appeared, a puppet of Volkov's, trying to get close to Vivian, and every promise, every restraint Sebastian had held to for 5 years, suddenly felt as fragile as a thread. His phone vibrated. A text from Natalie. "Sebastian, we need to talk." About Vivian. He stared at the screen, his gray eyes turning as dark as the sky before a storm. It seemed his sister knew about the date, too. And it seemed Sebastian's time to remain in the shadows was nearly over. Saturday arrived faster than Vivian expected. She spent the entire afternoon standing in front of her tiny closet, staring at her few, thin options. A handful of old shirts she wore to work, 2 pairs of jeans faded from too many washes, and the one black dress she had bought on sale 3 years ago, but had never once had a reason to wear. She took the dress out, smoothed the wrinkles flat, and wondered whether Jonathan Pierce would see how out of place she was when she sat across from him in some upscale restaurant. Vivian showered carefully, washed her hair with the only bottle of shampoo she had, then spent nearly an hour doing her hair and makeup. She did not own much, just a pale pink lipstick, a little brown eyeshadow, and mascara Natalie had given her for her birthday last year. She kept it soft, not too heavy, just enough to hide the dark circles left by sleepless nights. When she looked into the mirror, she saw a different version of herself. A Vivian who looked almost normal, almost like she belonged in a world of dates and gentle conversation over a glass of wine. The black dress hugged her body, falling to her knees, modest enough, yet fitted enough to show the curves she usually hid beneath an apron and oversized t-shirts. She slipped into the only pair of heels she owned, also a gift from Natalie, and pulled a thin sweater over her shoulders because the spring night still carried a chill. After taking one last look at the miserable studio, she drew a steadying breath and stepped out the door. Jonathan had texted to meet her at an Italian restaurant in Tribeca, a place where the taxi fare alone made Vivian's wallet ache, but she told herself it was an investment, a chance to step outside her comfort zone, to finally bring something ordinary into a life packed with upheaval. She walked down the stairs, her heels tapping a rhythm against the worn wooden steps, and pushed through the building's front door into the street. She barely made it 2 steps before she stopped short. A sleek black SUV was parked directly in front of the building, blocking her path. The vehicle was so luxurious it looked wrong on this poor street, like a diamond dropped into a trash heap. The windows were tinted a solid, unforgiving black, impossible to see through, and the engine idled steadily, a low purr like the breathing of some massive animal lying in wait. Vivian's heart began to pound. The survival instincts she had honed through years on the streets told her to turn back, run up the stairs, lock the door, and call the police. But before she could move, the rear door of the SUV swung open, and Sebastian Kane stepped out. He wore a black 3-piece suit, a crisp white shirt with no tie, his appearance so flawless it felt unreal. His cold gray eyes swept over her from head to toe, paused briefly on the black dress, then returned to her face with an expression she could not read. He stood there, tall and overwhelming, planted between her and the road like an unmovable wall. Vivian went still, unable to believe what she was seeing. Sebastian Kane, the man who had never looked directly at her for more than 3 seconds, the man who had treated her like furniture for 5 years, was standing outside her home on a Saturday night. It made no sense. "You, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaking more than she wanted to admit. Sebastian did not answer. He only opened the car door wider and spoke a single sentence, his voice low, a command that left no room for argument. "Get in. Now." Vivian stared at him like he had grown another head. She did not understand what was happening, did not understand why Sebastian Kane was here, and she certainly was not going to obey a stranger just because he had storm gray eyes and an expensive suit. "I have a date," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." She tried to step past him, but Sebastian moved faster, his long arm cutting off her path. His eyes darkened, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. "Jonathan Pierce is not who you think he is. Get in the car, or I will carry you." Vivian held his storm gray gaze, searching for any sign that this was only a cruel joke. But Sebastian Kane was not the kind of man who joked. He stood in front of her like a wall of steel, his arm still blocking her way, and the patience in his eyes was thinning by the second. "I don't know who you think you are," Vivian said, her voice trembling, though she forced it into firmness. "But you don't get to give me orders. I don't work for you. I don't owe you anything. And I am certainly not getting into a car with a man I have never even spoken to." Sebastian narrowed his eyes, something flashing in the gray. Maybe irritation. Maybe something else Vivian could not name. "You think you have never spoken to me," he repeated, his voice so low it was nearly a whisper. "You think I don't even know you exist. You know I exist." Vivian shot back, bitterness sharp in her throat. "For 5 years you have treated me as if I were a ghost, as if I were part of the wall in your penthouse." A cold wind swept through, and Vivian shivered inside her thin sweater. Sebastian studied her for a long moment, and then he did something she had not expected. He shrugged off his black suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the movement so quick she did not have time to react. The scent of whiskey and sandalwood wrapped around her, the scent she had secretly loved for 5 years, and her heart tightened as if it could not draw breath. "Get in the car," Sebastian said again, his voice softer now, but still impossible to refuse. "I will explain everything. But not here. Not on the street." Vivian wanted to refuse, wanted to throw the jacket back at him and walk away. But there was something in Sebastian's eyes that stopped her, an urgency she had never seen in the man who was always ice cold. And before she could think it through, her feet were already moving toward the SUV. Inside the vehicle was another world. Soft black leather seats, the scent of fine leather and expensive cologne, a gentle glow from the ceiling lights. Sebastian sat across from her in the spacious back seat, motioned for the driver to pull away, then turned to her with an expression so serious it was frightening. "Jonathan Pierce," he began, his voice cold as steel. "He is not who you think he is. He is not some respectable attorney looking for love on a dating app. He is Dmitry Volkov's puppet." Vivian blinked. "Dmitry Volkov? Who?" Sebastian looked at her for a moment, as if deciding how much to say. "Volkov is my family's enemy, a Russian kingpin trying to take over the Eastern Territory. He will not hesitate to use any method to bring me down, including getting close to the people around me. But I'm not one of the people around you," Vivian argued, her voice going thin. "I'm just Natalie's friend. I was just a guest who happened to help Natalie with the drinks. I have nothing to do with you." Sebastian was silent for a long time, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. Then he spoke, and what he said next turned Vivian's world upside down. "Vivian Marie Cole," he began, his voice even, as if he were reading a report. 27 years old, born March 15th, orphaned at 16 after your parents died in a traffic accident on the highway, thrown out by your uncle, Thomas Cole, on your 18th birthday, after he stole every cent of your parents' life insurance. Lived in a shelter in the outskirts of the city from 18 to 22, worked at the Blue Moon Cafe since 5 years ago. Salary, $750 a week. Clean offices at night to earn an additional $200 a week. Live in apartment 4B, 127 Maple Street. Rent, $600 a month. Vivian sat there with her mouth open, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to say something, to ask how he knew any of it, but her throat felt locked. Sebastian still was not finished. "You have a scar nearly 6 inches long on your left side," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "From an attack 5 years ago, in an alley off Maple Street. Stabbed once on your way back to the shelter after a late shift. You lost a lot of blood. You almost died." "How?" Vivian whispered, her voice shaking. "How do you know all of this?" Sebastian looked at her, and for the first time in 5 years, she saw a crack in his cold armor. The storm gray eyes were no longer ice. They burned, slow and deep, with something that felt painful, urgent, and raw. "Because I'm the one who found you that night," he said, his voice roughening. "I'm the one who took you to the hospital. I'm the one who held you in my arms the whole way, my hand pressed to your bleeding wound, praying you wouldn't die. And I'm the one who paid every hospital bill without leaving a name." Vivian's world stopped. She stared at Sebastian, the man she had quietly loved for 5 years, the man she thought had never even known she existed, and realized everything she believed had been a lie. He was not a stranger. He was the man who had saved her life, and he had hidden it for 5 years. Vivian could not breathe. She sat there in the luxurious SUV, staring at Sebastian as if she were looking at a stranger. And he was a stranger, truly. And yet he was also the man who had saved her life, the unnamed benefactor she had searched for over 5 years with no clue to follow. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did you save me? Why did you pay the hospital bills? Why did you hide it?" Sebastian did not answer right away. He turned his face toward the window, storm gray eyes catching the streetlights as they slid past in blurred streaks. The silence stretched until it hurt, and Vivian could hear her own heart pounding inside her chest, could feel her thoughts spinning with hundreds of questions that had no answers. She remembered that night, the cold pavement under her back, the tearing pain at her side, the darkness swallowing her sight before she slipped into unconsciousness. And in that last moment, she remembered a voice, low and urgent, ordering someone to call an ambulance. That voice had been Sebastian's. "I don't know," Sebastian finally said, his voice rough, as if he were holding something back. "I don't know why I stopped the car that night. I had passed that alley hundreds of times and never once looked in, but that night I saw you, a small figure on the sidewalk, blood spreading into a dark pool. And I couldn't keep driving. I couldn't leave you there." Vivian felt tears spill over, hot against her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. She only sat there, looking at Sebastian, trying to fit the broken pieces of the story together. "But why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice strangled. 5 years. 5 years I wondered who saved me. 5 years I wanted to find that person and say thank you. And you were right in front of me the whole time, at those parties, in your penthouse, and you never said a word. Sebastian turned back to her, and Vivian saw something fracture inside those cold gray eyes. "Because if I told you," he answered, his voice so low it was nearly a whisper, "I wouldn't have been able to stop there. I would have wanted more, to know how you were living, to make sure you were safe, to be near you, and I couldn't allow myself to do that." "Why not?" Vivian asked, not understanding. "Because I am what you should stay away from," Sebastian said, bitterness in every word. "I am darkness, Vivian. Violence. Everything ugly you should never touch. You deserve a normal life, a normal man, not a criminal like me. But you saved my life," Vivian said, as if that could erase everything he had just told her. "One kind moment does not erase 20 years of violence," Sebastian replied, hard-edged. "I've killed people, Vivian. I've destroyed other families. I've done things you can't even imagine. And no matter how many times I save you, it doesn't change what I am." Vivian fell silent, not knowing what to say. She looked at the man sitting across from her, the man she had quietly loved from a distance for 5 years, the man she thought had never even known she existed, and realized she did not know him at all. Sebastian Kane was not the cold statue she had imagined. He was a man of contradictions, ruthless and gentle, distant and protective, and he had been watching over her for 5 years without her ever knowing. The car came to a stop, and Vivian startled as she realized they were not in front of her apartment. Instead, they were standing before the familiar Kine building, the lights from the penthouse on the top floor glittering against the night. "This isn't my home," she said, panic rising in her voice. "You can't go home tonight," Sebastian answered, his voice no longer cold, but carrying a deep exhaustion. "Jonathan Pierce knows your address. He knows your routine, and now he knows you didn't show up for the date. You're not safe, so you're going to keep me here?" Vivian asked, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Like a prisoner." Sebastian opened the door, stepped out, then turned back and offered her his hand. "Not a prisoner," he said, storm gray eyes locked on hers. "A guest. Someone I will protect at any cost. Until I deal with the threat from Volkov, you'll stay here, safe, under my protection." Vivian looked at the hand held out in front of her, then up into those storm gray eyes, and she knew she had no other choice. She placed her hand in Sebastian's and let him lead her into his world. The room Sebastian led Vivian into was larger than her entire studio apartment. The walls were painted a pale cream, and a king-size bed sat dressed in white sheets as clean as clouds. A wide glass window looked out over the city, glittering with lights. There was a private bathroom with a marble tub, an empty closet waiting to be filled, and a bouquet of fresh flowers on the nightstand, as if someone had prepared for her arrival. Vivian stood in the middle of it all, feeling out of place, like a fish thrown into unfamiliar water. "If you need anything, call the butler," Sebastian said from the doorway, his voice back to its usual coldness. "The refrigerator has food. The bathroom has everything you need. Don't leave the penthouse." "And if I want to leave?" Vivian asked, turning to face him. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. "Then you'll find that every exit has guards. This is for your safety, Vivian, not to imprison you." "What's the difference?" she answered, bitterness in her voice. Sebastian did not reply. He only watched her a moment longer, then turned and walked away, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Vivian was alone in the luxurious room, surrounded by everything she had never dared to dream of, and she had never felt so lonely. She did not know how long she stood there, looking out the window without truly seeing anything. Her mind was still spinning with everything that had happened in the last few hours. Sebastian had saved her. Sebastian had paid the hospital bills. Sebastian had watched her for 5 years. And now Sebastian was keeping her in his penthouse, like a bird in a gilded cage. She did not know what she was supposed to feel, grateful or furious, frightened or safe, or all of it at once. The sound of the penthouse front door opening pulled Vivian from her thoughts. She heard hurried footsteps, then Natalie's familiar voice, sharp with anger and unmasked. "What did you do?" Natalie shouted, and Vivian could hear every word through the door that was slightly ajar. "You promised me. You promised you would never touch her." Sebastian's voice was low and steadier, but still loud enough for Vivian to hear. "I'm protecting her." "Protecting?" Natalie let out a harsh laugh. "You kidnapped her. You brought her here as if she were something that belongs to you." "That isn't protection, Sebastian. That's obsession." Vivian moved closer to the door, her heart pounding hard. She knew she should not be listening, but this conversation was about her, and she had a right to know. "Jonathan Pierce works for Volkov," Sebastian said, his voice dropping lower. "He went after Vivian not out of affection. He wants to use her to get to me." There was a long silence. Then Natalie's voice came again, quieter, but still tight with strain. "So you told her everything? About that night? About the fact that you've been watching her? She deserved the truth." Sebastian replied. "The truth," Natalie repeated, her voice bitter. "Which truth, Sebastian? The truth that you've been obsessed with her for 5 years. That you know everything about her life. That you arranged for her to get that job at the cafe without telling her. Did you tell her all of that?" Sebastian said nothing, and that silence was more frightening than any words. "I warned you," Natalie said, her voice trembling. 5 years ago, when I saw the way you looked at her in the hospital. I made you promise you would keep your distance. Because I knew what you would do. I knew you would ruin her." "I'm not ruining her," Sebastian said, his voice pulled tight as wire. "I'm saving her." "You're possessing her," Natalie shot back. "What's the difference, Sebastian? With you, what's the difference?" Vivian stood behind the door, her hand gripping the wooden frame, and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Sebastian had arranged her job. Sebastian had been watching her for 5 years, and Natalie, her closest friend, had known all of it and never said a word. Vivian no longer knew who to trust. She no longer knew what was real, and she no longer knew what kind of story she had fallen into, a love story or a nightmare. The clock on the wall read 2 in the morning when Vivian gave up on trying to sleep. She had been lying on the soft king-size bed for hours, staring at the ceiling in the dark, her mind spinning with the fragments she had overheard from the argument between Sebastian and Natalie. He had been obsessed with her for 5 years. He had arranged her job. He knew everything about her life, and Natalie had known all of it, had kept it from her for all those years. While still smiling and calling Vivian her best friend, Vivian sat up, slipped into the silk robe someone had left in the closet, and quietly opened the bedroom door. The penthouse lay in darkness and silence, lit only by the city glow filtering through enormous windows, casting faint bands of light across the marble floor. Barefoot, she went down the stairs, meaning to find the kitchen for a glass of water, but she stopped when she saw a sliver of light coming from the living room. Sebastian was sitting alone on a black leather sofa, in a darkness softened only by the city lights and the small fire in the fireplace. He had taken off his suit jacket and tie, wearing only a white dress shirt with the top buttons undone, a half-finished glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired, stripped of the cold authority he wore during the day, like a man carrying something far too heavy on his shoulders. "You can't sleep," Sebastian said without turning around, as if he had known she was standing there from the beginning. His voice was low and rough, mingling with the soft crackle of the fire. Vivian did not answer. She walked into the living room and sat in the chair across from him. In the flickering light, she studied him, the faint scar through his left eyebrow, the tension in his jaw, the storm-gray eyes fixed on his glass as if it held the answer to every problem in the world. "You can't sleep either," she said. Not a question, a statement. Sebastian took a sip of whiskey. "I don't sleep much. Sleep comes to people with clean consciences." Vivian was quiet for a moment, measuring her next words. "I heard your conversation with Natalie." Sebastian did not look surprised. He only nodded slowly, his gray eyes finally lifting to meet hers. "And what do you want to ask?" "Everything," Vivian answered, her voice firmer than she expected. "I want to know why you watched me. Why you arranged that job and never told me. Why you know everything about my life while I know nothing about you. Why you saved me that night and then disappeared as if I were just a task you needed to complete." Sebastian set the whiskey glass down on the table, the sound of glass against wood sharp in the stillness. He looked at her, and in those gray eyes Vivian saw something she had never seen before. Not coldness, not control, but a deep pain. buried under layers and layers of armor. You want the truth, he said slowly. The truth is, I don't know why I stopped the car that night. I have passed thousands of people in trouble in my life and never once looked back. But with you, I couldn't. I saw you lying there, blood everywhere, and something in me broke. Broke, Vivian repeated, not understanding. Sebastian stood and walked to the glass window, his back to her. His silhouette against the night sky looked like a lonely monument. I've been a monster for 20 years, Vivian. I've done things that can't be forgiven. I've killed people, destroyed families, turned into something even I hate. And that night, when I held you, when I felt your blood warm on my skin, I realized I could still feel, that I wasn't completely dead inside. Vivian rose and stepped closer, close enough to see her own reflection in the window beside his shadow. So you watched me. I needed to know you were safe, Sebastian said, still not turning around. I needed to know you were alive, breathing, existing in this world. It was like an anchor keeping me tied to whatever humanity I had left. That's obsession, Sebastian, not feelings. Sebastian turned, and the space between them suddenly felt so small it was suffocating. His storm-gray eyes burned in the dark, fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees want to buckle. You think I don't know the difference, he said, his voice thick and rough. You think I don't know that what I feel for you has been far beyond obsession for a long time. Vivian's heart beat so hard she could hear it in her ears. He stood too close, the scent of whiskey and sandalwood closing around her, and she could not think straight. What do you feel? She asked, her voice no more than breath. Sebastian held her gaze for a long moment, his eyes tracing her face, as if committing every line to memory. Then he stepped back, the space returned, and the familiar coldness slid over his features like a mask. You should go to sleep, he said, his voice back under control. It's late. You didn't answer my question, Vivian said, but Sebastian had already turned away, his shadow disappearing into the darkness of the hallway, leaving her alone with the half-finished whiskey and the fire dying down in the fireplace. Vivian woke with a dull headache and puffy eyes from tears she had cried in the night without fully realizing it. Morning sunlight poured through the glass windows, flooding the luxurious room with brightness, but she did not feel warm. She could still remember the way Sebastian had looked at her last night, storm-gray eyes burning with something he refused to put into words, and then the way he had stepped back and walked away as if she were a flame he did not dare touch. She was still caught in that thought when a knock sounded, and Natalie walked in without waiting for an answer. We need to talk, Natalie said, her voice so serious Vivian almost did not recognize the bright, playful friend she had known for 5 years. The Kane girl closed the door, crossed to the bed, sat down beside Vivian, and looked at her with eyes red-rimmed as if she, too, had been crying all night. I owe you an explanation. About everything. Vivian sat up, pulled the blanket up to cover her chest, and waited. She did not know what she should say. She did not know whether she wanted to hear it. But she knew she needed to understand. Needed to know why the closest friend she had ever had kept something this enormous from her for so long. Natalie drew a deep breath and began. 5 years ago, when you were in the hospital after the attack, I visited you every day. You know that. But what you don't know is that Sebastian came too. Every night. When you were asleep, he sat in the chair beside your bed for hours, just watching you breathe. I caught him once, at 3 a.m, and it was the first time in my life I ever saw my brother cry. Vivian's heart tightened. She could not imagine Sebastian, a man as cold as ice, a man who ran a criminal empire with an iron hand, sitting beside her hospital bed and crying. It made no sense. I asked him why. Natalie continued, her voice trembling. And he said he didn't know. That there was something about you that he couldn't walk away from. That when he held you that night, your blood on his skin, he felt as if he himself were bleeding. I have never seen him like that, Viv. Never. Then why didn't you tell me? Vivian asked, her voice catching. Why did you hide this for 5 years? Natalie looked down, twisting a tissue already soaked with tears. Because I was afraid. I know my brother, Viv. I know what kind of man he is. He doesn't know how to love without possessing. He doesn't know how to care without controlling. Every woman who has ever been with him ended up shattered, crushed beneath his obsession, until there was nothing left. And I couldn't let that happen to you, so you made him promise. Vivian said, remembering what she had overheard last night. Natalie nodded. I made him swear on our mother's grave that he would keep his distance from you, that he would never approach you, never speak to you, never let you know how he felt. And he agreed. He kept that promise for 5 years, Viv. 5 years he watched you from far away, knew everything about your life, and never once came close. But he still watched me, Vivian said, bitterness rising. He still arranged my job. He still knew everything. Because it was the only way he could be near you without breaking the promise. Natalie lifted her eyes, swimming with tears. I know it was wrong, Viv. I know I should have told you from the beginning, but I thought I was protecting you. I thought if you didn't know, you would be safe. You would have a normal life, find a normal man, and never have to be tangled in the insane world of my family. Vivian was quiet for a long time, absorbing everything she had just heard. She looked at Natalie, the closest friend she had in the world, and she did not know what she was supposed to feel. Betrayed, protected, furious, grateful. All of it tangled together inside her like a storm with no way out. Does he love me? She finally asked. The question she had wanted to ask since last night. The question Sebastian had refused to answer. Natalie looked at her, and in those brown eyes Vivian saw the truth she had known for a long time, but had been too afraid to name. He doesn't just love you, Viv. He is obsessed with you. He breathes because of you. And that is what scares me the most, because when Sebastian Kane loves someone, he loves with all of his madness. And I don't know if you would survive that. 2 days inside the penthouse passed like 2 centuries. Vivian was trapped within 4 luxurious walls, served everything from food to new clothes, yet not allowed to step outside even once. Sebastian avoided her after that night, appearing only briefly at dinner, before disappearing into his office or leaving for work. Natalie visited every day, trying to mend what had broken, but the air between them remained tight, crowded with words that never made it to the surface. Vivian felt as if she were suffocating, controlled by a man she did not even know whether she was supposed to love or hate. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, while Vivian sat alone in the living room reading, her phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, and her heart clenched when she saw Jonathan Pierce's name. She had forgotten about this phone. Sebastian had not taken it, perhaps because he assumed she would not dare contact anyone. But seeing Jonathan's name lit a flare of anger inside her. She was tired of being controlled, tired of being treated like something that needed guarding, tired of everyone making decisions for her without ever asking what she wanted. She answered, Vivian. Jonathan's voice came through, warm and concerned in a way that sounded perfectly practiced. Are you all right? I've been worried for days when you didn't show up and you didn't answer my messages. What happened? Vivian knew she should hang up. She knew Sebastian had warned her about Jonathan, about Volkov, about danger. But a part of her, the part that had been crushed down for 3 days, wanted to prove she still owned her own life, that Sebastian Kane did not own her. I'm fine, she said, steadier than she felt. Something came up. I heard you're with the Kane family, Jonathan said, his concern still in place, but with something colder underneath that Vivian did not notice. Is Sebastian Kane keeping you there? Do you need help? I can call the police if you want. No, Vivian answered quickly. I'm here by choice. Is that so? Jonathan asked, and this time she could hear a smile in his voice. Then maybe we can reschedule our date. I still want to see you, Vivian. Very much. Before Vivian could answer, the living room doors flew open with a violent bang. Sebastian stood in the doorway, storm-gray eyes blazing with a fury she had never seen, his face carved from stone. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the cords in his neck. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, yanked the phone from her hand, and lifted it to his ear. Pierce, Sebastian roared, his voice like thunder before a storm. If you contact her one more time, I'll cut off every finger you have and send them to Volkov as a gift. Do you understand? He did not wait for an answer. He simply hurled the phone at the wall, with enough force to shatter it into 100 pieces. Vivian sprang to her feet, her heart racing, half fear, half fury. What the hell are you doing? She shouted, her voice trembling, but she did not step back. That was my phone, my call. You don't have the right. I don't have the right. Sebastian turned on her, eyes like a storm, stepping close enough that she could feel his hot breath against her face. You were just speaking to a man who works for someone who wants to kill me, a man who wants to use you to bring me down. And you're telling me I don't have the right. I am not your property, Vivian shot back, refusing to yield. I am not an object for you to control. You can't lock me in here, decide who I can talk to, read my messages, track my every step like I'm some criminal. I'm protecting you, Sebastian snarled. You're possessing me, Vivian yelled, tears spilling even though she did not want them to. Those are not the same thing. Sebastian, And you can't tell the difference because you've never learned how to love someone without turning them into something that belongs to you. Sebastian went still, as if she had slapped him. The storm-gray eyes trembled, his jaw tightening and then loosening, and she saw something fracture in his gaze. But it lasted only a heartbeat, and then the coldness returned, rising again like a steel wall. "You want freedom," he said, his voice ice-cold. "You want to prove you're not controlled. Then remember this when Volkov comes for you. When Pierce pulls you into a trap. When you realize the world outside this penthouse isn't as safe as you think. Don't expect me to come save you again." He turned and walked away, and Vivian stood there among the broken pieces of her phone, feeling as if she had shattered too. She wanted to call after him, wanted to say something that would take back what she had said, but pride and anger still burned in her, and she only stood there, watching his shadow disappear behind the door. She did not know that this would be the argument that changed everything, that 3 days later, when she slipped out of the penthouse to prove her freedom, she would walk straight into the trap Jonathan Pierce had already set. 3 days after the argument, the penthouse had turned into a cold battlefield. Sebastian and Vivian avoided each other like two planets locked into separate orbits, crossing paths only in passing at meals where neither of them spoke a single word. He buried himself in work, leaving early in the morning and coming back when it was already deep night, while she counted the hours inside the elegant space she had begun to hate like a prison. Natalie tried to be a bridge between them, but it was useless. They were both too proud and too wounded to give ground. Vivian knew she had said bitter things, but she also knew she was not wrong. Sebastian could not keep her locked up like this. He could not control every corner of her life just because he believed it was protection. On the third night, when the clock neared midnight and the entire penthouse lay in silence, Vivian made a decision. She would leave. Not forever. Just for one night. Just to prove that she was still the one who chose her own fate. She pulled on jeans and a dark hoodie, tied her hair back neatly, then quietly opened her bedroom door. The hallway was empty, dim nightlights washing over expensive paintings on the walls. She knew the front door had guards. The elevator had surveillance cameras, but she also knew there was a fire escape stairwell at the end of the corridor that Sebastian did not think she knew about. She moved as softly as a shadow, her heart pounding hard, and pushed the fire escape door open. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of the city and freedom. She had barely taken one step when she froze. Sebastian stood on the steps above, his back against the wall, storm-gray eyes lit in the dark like a wolf's. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he watched her with an expression she could not read. "Where do you think you're going, Vivian?" She went still, her heart dropping into her stomach. "How did you know?" "I always know," Sebastian answered, his voice low and tired. "I know everything about you, how many hours you sleep, what you eat with every meal, what time you cry at night. I know you studied the layout of this penthouse for the past 2 days, that you found the fire escape, that you would try to slip out tonight." Anger flared in Vivian again. "You're watching me even inside your own home. You're sick, Sebastian." "Maybe," he admitted, stepping down one stair closer to her. "Maybe I am sick. Maybe I am insane. Maybe I am everything you called me the other day. Possessive, controlling, incapable of love. But that does not change the truth." "What truth?" Vivian asked, her voice shaking as she backed up one step when he moved closer. "The truth is I can't let you go," Sebastian said, his voice rough, his storm-gray eyes burning with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "I tried. For 5 years I tried to keep my distance. 5 years I watched you from far away, knew everything about you, but didn't dare touch you. 5 years I told myself you deserved better, that I should let you have a normal life. But I can't. I tried, and I failed. That's not a reason to lock me in here," Vivian said, but her voice had gone weaker. Sebastian stepped closer again, and now he was right in front of her, close enough that she could smell the familiar whiskey and sandalwood, close enough that she could see every line of the scar through his eyebrow. "You wanted to know why I did all of this," he said, his voice so low it was nearly a whisper. "Why I saved you that night, why I paid the hospital bills, why I watched you, why I can't let you go." Vivian did not answer. She only stared at him, her heart beating wildly in her chest. "Because I love you," Sebastian said, and the words landed like a confession, like a bullet, like a curse. "I have loved you since the night I held you in my arms and prayed you wouldn't die. I loved you when you didn't know I existed. I loved you when you smiled at someone else, when you cried alone in that miserable studio, when you wore that black dress to go on a date with a bastard. I love you to the point of madness, to the point I hate myself for it, to the point I don't know who I am anymore without you." "Sebastian," Vivian whispered, not knowing what she meant to say. "And that's why I can't let you go," he continued, lifting his hand to her cheek, so gentle she could barely feel it. "Not because I want to control you, but because if anything happens to you, I won't survive it. You are the only thing that keeps me human. The only thing that makes me want to wake up every morning. The only thing that makes me believe that maybe, just maybe, I'm not completely a monster." Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks, hot and unstoppable. She looked at the man in front of her, the man who had haunted her for 5 years, the man who had saved her life, the man who had loved her from the shadows without asking for anything. And she realized she did not want to run anymore. She placed her hand on his chest, felt the frantic beat of his heart beneath the fabric of his shirt. "You're an idiot," she said, her voice breaking. "A possessive, controlling, completely insane idiot." "I know," Sebastian whispered, his forehead touching hers. And then he kissed her. His mouth was warm and desperate, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 5 years, as if he were afraid that if he stopped, she would disappear. Vivian kissed him back, surrendering, melting. And in that moment, under the moonlight spilling through the stairwell window, she knew her life would never be the same again. That kiss did not end in the fire escape stairwell. Sebastian lifted Vivian up, his strong arms holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and carried her to his room. The room was dark, lit only by moonlight slipping through the enormous glass window, laying a silver wash across the king-sized bed dressed in charcoal sheets. He set her down gently. His storm-gray eyes did not leave her for even a second, as if he feared that if he blinked, she would vanish like a dream. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough, his hand brushing through her dark brown hair. "If you want to stop, say so now, because if we cross this line, I will never let you go." Vivian looked up at him, into those gray eyes burning with both love and fear, and she knew her answer. She pulled him down, her mouth finding his, and that was all he needed. That night was the eruption of 5 years of restraint, 5 years of hunger, 5 years of love, kept in the dark. Sebastian touched her as if he were worshipping a god, each kiss a whispered prayer, each caress a promise. He was so gentle it made her want to cry, and yet so full of desire it stole her breath. He asked again and again if she was all right, if she wanted to stop, as if her consent were the most precious thing on earth. And when they finally became one, Vivian understood this was not only flesh, this was 2 broken souls finding each other in the dark. 2 lonely people, at last coming home. Afterward, they lay in silence. Vivian curled in Sebastian's arms, her head resting on his chest, listening as his heartbeat slowly returned to steady. The room remained dark, filled only with moonlight and their breathing, and a peace she had never known in her life. "The scar on your eyebrow," she whispered, her finger tracing the faint line with care. "Where did it come from?" Sebastian was silent for a long time, and Vivian thought he would not answer. But then he spoke, his voice low and far away. "My father," he said. "He was the head of the Kaini Empire before me, a brutal man, cold to the bone, who believed children had to be shaped with fists and straps. This scar came from the time he hit me with a diamond ring when I was 12 years old, because I dared to cry in front of him." Vivian held her breath, her heart tightening for the man who was holding her. She could not imagine a 12-year-old child bleeding at his own father's hand for something as human as tears. He said, "Strong people do not cry." Sebastian went on, his voice flat, as if he were telling someone else's story. "They do not show weakness. They do not love, because love is weakness, and weakness will get you killed. I was taught that from the time I was small, trained to become a weapon, not a person. And when he died, I replaced him. I became what he wanted me to be, a monster." "You are not a monster," Vivian said, lifting her head to look at him. "I have killed people, Vivian." Sebastian looked at her, storm gray, eyes full of shadow. "I have destroyed families. I have done things that cannot be forgiven. And you also saved my life," she answered, her voice firm. "You paid my hospital bills. You arranged my job. You protected me for 5 years without asking for anything. Monsters do not do those things." Sebastian fell silent, staring at her as if she had spoken something impossible. Vivian lowered her face and placed a soft kiss on the scar through his eyebrow. "I have my own scars," she whispered. "Not only on my skin, but in my heart. My parents died when I was 16. My uncle threw me out when I was 18. I lived in a shelter. I was stabbed and nearly died, and I thought life would never give me anything good." She paused, looking into his eyes. "But then I met Natalie, and I had you, even when I did not know it." Maybe we are both broken in our own ways, Sebastian. But maybe our broken pieces fit together. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes shimmering with something she could not name. Then he pulled her into his chest, holding her tight as if he feared someone might steal her away. I do not deserve you, he whispered into her hair. Let me decide that, Vivian said, closing her eyes and letting his heartbeat lull her into sleep. That night, for the first time in many years, both of them slept without nightmares. Morning sunlight poured through the glass windows when Vivian woke, feeling Sebastian's warmth still lingering on the pillow even though he was no longer beside her. She lay there for a while, staring up at an unfamiliar ceiling, and smiled as last night came back to her. Everything had changed. She was no longer the invisible server. She was the woman Sebastian Kane loved, and as terrifying as that was, she did not want to go back. She got up, pulled on Sebastian's white shirt, still carrying the trace of sandalwood, and quietly opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty in the pale morning light, and she meant to return to her own room to shower and change. But she had barely taken a few steps when she stopped short. Natalie stood at the far end of the hall, a cup of coffee in her hand, her brown eyes wide as she watched Vivian step out of her brother's room, wearing his shirt, hair tousled, lips still swollen and red from last night's kisses. The silence stretched like a century. Vivian could see every emotion crossing Natalie's face, from shock to understanding, from understanding to pain, from pain to anger. The coffee cup trembled in the Caney girl's hand, and when she finally spoke, her voice was ice. Natalie, Vivian began, but her friend lifted a hand to stop her. Don't, Natalie said, her voice shaking, bitter to the core. Don't say anything. I don't want to hear it. She turned and walked quickly toward the living room, and Vivian hurried after her, her heart pounding wildly. Natalie, please, let me explain. Explain what? Natalie spun around, brown eyes bright with tears and fury. That you just slept with my brother. That you destroyed everything I've tried to protect you from for 5 years. That you and he betrayed me under this roof. No one betrayed you, Vivian said, forcing her voice to stay steady even as her heart cracked. It happened last night. Only last night. I wasn't going to hide it from you. But you did hide it, Natalie shouted, and the coffee cup slipped from her hand, crashed onto the marble floor, and shattered. You knew I would be against it. You knew I made him promise, and you still chose this. You chose him over our friendship. I didn't choose anyone over anyone. Tears began to spill down Vivian's cheeks. I love him, Natalie. I've loved him long before I knew he loved me too, and I know it isn't fair to you, but I can't control my heart. Love. Natalie gave a harsh, bitter laugh. You call that love? He is obsessed with you, Viv. He watched you. He controlled you. He locked you in this penthouse like a prisoner. That isn't love. That's sickness. He's changing, Vivian said, her voice weakening. He's not who you think he is. He will never change. Natalie stepped closer, eyes red-rimmed but full of resolve. I'm his sister. I've known him since the day I was born. I know him better than anyone. And I'm telling you, Sebastian Kane doesn't know how to love without destroying. He will crush you, Viv. And when he does, I won't be there to pick up the pieces again. You don't get to decide that, Vivian said, her voice suddenly firmer. It's my life, my choice, and I've lost the two people closest to me to each other, Natalie said, her voice breaking. My brother and my best friend. You both chose each other over me. You both betrayed me. She wiped at her tears and stepped back. I need time. I can't look at you right now. I can't look at him either. Natalie turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble, echoing through the silent penthouse. Vivian stood there among the shattered pieces of the coffee cup, feeling as if she had shattered too. She had Sebastian, but she might have just lost Natalie, and she did not know whether there was any way to keep them both. Vivian was still standing frozen among the shards of the shattered coffee cup when Natalie's footsteps stopped abruptly. She lifted her head and saw Sebastian at the end of the hallway, blocking his sister's path. He wore black slacks and a gray shirt, his hair still damp from the shower, and his storm-gray eyes were fixed on Natalie with an expression Vivian could not read. He had heard everything. Vivian knew it from the way his jaw locked tight, from the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. Move, Sebastian, Natalie said, her voice ice-cold. I don't want to talk to you right now, but I do. Sebastian did not budge. I heard what you said to her, and I'm not letting you leave until you listen to me. Listen to what? Natalie let out a harsh laugh, her brown eyes still red from tears. More excuses for your sick obsession. More promises you'll break. You promised me... Sebastian, you swore on Mom's grave you would never touch her. And I kept that promise for 5 years. Sebastian answered, his voice low but unyielding. 5 years I watched her from a distance. 5 years I held back everything I felt. 5 years I lived in hell because of you, because of that promise. But I can't keep doing it, Natalie. I tried, and I failed. So you chose her over me, Natalie said, her voice breaking. You chose to break your promise, to break my trust, to break everything, just because you can't control yourself. I chose her because I love her, Sebastian said, and the words rolled through the room like thunder. Not obsession, not possession, love. I love her in a way I have never loved anyone in my life. Natalie went still, staring at her brother as if she had never met this man before. Sebastian Kane, the cold kingpin, the man who never spoke about feelings, was standing in front of her and declaring love. You don't know how to love, Natalie said, but her voice had weakened. You only know how to possess, how to control, how to destroy. Maybe you're right, Sebastian admitted, and Vivian saw his shoulders dip slightly. Maybe I don't know how to love the right way. Maybe I'll make mistakes. Maybe I'll hurt her even when I don't mean to, but I will try. Every day, I will try to become the man she deserves. And if that means changing everything I've ever been, then I will. Tears rose in Vivian's eyes at those words. She stepped to Sebastian's side and placed a hand on his arm, and he turned to her with a softness that made her heart melt. I don't know if I can trust you, Natalie said, exhaustion threading through her voice. I've seen you with so many women. I've seen you make promises and then walk away. I've seen them fall apart when you got bored. They weren't Vivian, Sebastian said, his hand closing around Vivian's as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. I've never felt this way about anyone. Never been willing to give up everything just to have one person. You don't have to believe me. You can think I'll hurt her again. But I'm asking you for one chance to prove you wrong. Natalie looked at them, looked at the way Sebastian held Vivian's hand, the way they stood together as if they could not be separated. And a part of her, the part that had loved her brother for her entire life, saw something she had never seen before. The softness in eyes that were always ice, the gentleness in the way he touched Vivian, the fear at the thought of losing her. I need time, Natalie finally said, drained. I can't accept this right now. I need to think. I need to process everything. I understand, Sebastian nodded. But remember, no matter what, you're still my sister. And Vivian is still your best friend. We don't want to lose you. Natalie did not answer. She only looked at Vivian for a long moment, her brown eyes full of pain and conflict, then turned and walked away. The sound of the elevator doors closing echoed through the silent penthouse, and Vivian stood there, leaning into Sebastian, feeling as if she had won a battle but lost something precious in the process. She'll come back, Sebastian whispered, kissing the top of her head. She just needs time. Vivian did not answer. She only held him tighter and prayed he was right. 3 days had passed since Natalie walked out, and Vivian could not endure it anymore. She had called, she had texted, but Natalie did not answer a single call or message. Sebastian told her to give Natalie time, that his sister would cool down, but Vivian knew she could not just sit there and wait. She had to do something. She had to prove to Natalie that their friendship still mattered to her, and she knew exactly what kind of gift might begin to stitch the wound closed. Natalie had once mentioned a silver necklace in a small shop in Greenwich Village, an antique piece from the 1920s that she had been eyeing for months but had never bought. Vivian had been saving money from her barista pay, enough to purchase that gift as an apology. The only problem was that she would have to leave the penthouse to get it, and Sebastian would never allow that. On the morning of the 4th day, when Sebastian left for a meeting and the penthouse was empty, Vivian made her decision. She knew there was an exit through the underground parking level, where the guards often grew careless around midday. She put on jeans and a dark hoodie, pulled a baseball cap low to hide her face, and slipped down to the basement without anyone noticing. When she stepped into sunlight for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, she drew a deep breath and felt free. She hailed a taxi, gave the address of the shop in Greenwich Village, and told herself she would be back before Sebastian even knew she had gone. She was wrong. The antique store sat in a quiet, narrow alley, and Vivian did not notice the black van parked at the corner when she walked out with a small box tucked in her pocket. She only managed a few steps before a hand clamped over her mouth from behind, and a sweet chemical smell flooded her nose. She tried to struggle. She tried to scream, but the world had already begun to spin and darken. The last thing she saw before she blacked out was Jonathan Pierce's face, his polite smile now twisted into something cruel and chilling. Sebastian was in the middle of a meeting with his men when his phone buzzed. He meant to ignore it, But when he saw an unfamiliar number and a notification that a video was attached, a bad instinct made him stop. He opened the message, and his world collapsed. In the video, Vivian sat on a wooden chair, her hands bound behind her back, duct tape over her mouth. Her dark brown hair was a tangled mess that hid half her face, and he could see the bruise on her cheek, could see her green eyes filled with fear and yet still fierce with defiance. A hand entered the frame, yanked her head back, and Jonathan Pierce's voice came through. "Sebastian Kane," he said, his tone rich with pleasure. "I know you're watching. I have something that belongs to you, and Dmitry Volkov would very much like to talk about the future of the Kane Empire. You have 8 hours to surrender all Eastern territory. If not, this beautiful woman will pay, piece by piece." The video ended, and Sebastian stood frozen. Marcus, standing beside him, saw his boss's face go pale as if he had seen a ghost. "Sir," Marcus asked, his voice tight with worry. "What happened?" Sebastian did not answer. He hurled the phone at the wall with a savage roar, glass exploding across the floor. Then he lunged for his desk, swept everything off it, and slammed his fist into the wood until blood ran from scraped knuckles. He could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything except see Vivian's face in his mind, her eyes wide with fear, the bruise on her cheek, and know that he had failed to protect her. Marcus and the others stood in silence, shaken by the eruption of their leader. They had seen Sebastian angry before. They had seen him coldly order enemies handled without a tremor, but they had never seen him like this, uncontrolled, feral, desperate. "Find her," Sebastian finally roared, turning on Marcus with eyes red and wild. "Mobilize everyone, every resource, every connection. I don't care what it takes, how many people have to die. Find her, right now." "And Volkov?" Marcus asked. "He wants the Eastern Territory. He wants me to surrender," Sebastian said, his voice ice cold even as his eyes still burned with fury. "He will get something, but it won't be territory. He will get the slowest, most painful death I can think of. And Jonathan Pierce," Sebastian paused, his jaw tightening. "He will beg to die before I am finished with him." He walked out, leaving wreckage behind, and for the first time in 20 years as the kingpin, Sebastian Kane did not know whether he was strong enough to save the woman he loved. Vivian woke in darkness, her head pounding like a hammer and her mouth dry as dust. She did not know where she was. She only knew she was sitting on a hard wooden chair, her hands tied behind her with rope pulled so tight her wrists had gone numb. The room looked like an abandoned warehouse, damp brick walls, windows sealed shut with wooden boards, and only a single ceiling bulb giving off a weak, yellowed light. She tried to shift, but the rope only cinched tighter, cutting into her skin. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had survived worse than this. She would survive this too. A rusty metal door opened with a long, screeching creak, and Jonathan Pierce stepped inside. The polite smile was gone completely, replaced by a cold, ruthless face Vivian had never seen before. He dragged a chair over and sat in front of her, one leg crossed over the other, as if preparing for an intimate conversation. "You're awake," Jonathan said, his voice gentle in a way that was terrifying. "Good. I want you to see everything that happens. I want you to understand that you are only a pawn in a game that is much bigger than you." Vivian stared at him, her green eyes burning with hatred even as her heart raced with fear. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice hoarse. "Sebastian will find you, and he will kill you." Jonathan laughed, the sound echoing through the empty room. "Sebastian Kane." He repeated the name as if tasting it. "The great kingpin, the man the entire city fears. You know, Vivian, I have studied him for years, searching for a weakness, and I found nothing. He is perfect, cold, unemotional, nothing to lose." Jonathan leaned closer, his eyes glittering with pleasure. "Then you appeared, and I knew I had found what I needed." Vivian felt the blood in her veins turn cold. "I am not his weakness. You are everything to him," Jonathan said, his voice thick with contempt. "I saw the way he looked at you at parties when he thought no one noticed. I saw the way he went insane when you did not show up for your date with me. Sebastian Kane, the man who has never lost control, called and threatened me just because I dared to get close to you." He paused, smiling. "Dmitry Volkov will be very pleased. The Eastern Territory will belong to us, and it will all be thanks to you." At the same time, in the Kane family penthouse, Sebastian was turning the meeting room into a war command center. A city map lay spread across the table. Laptop screens displayed, images pulled from surveillance cameras everywhere, and dozens of calls were made every minute. He did not sit. He did not rest. He only paced like a caged animal, storm gray eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and a fury he could not contain. Marcus fed him updates nonstop, but after 4 hours, they still had not found Vivian's location. The elevator doors opened, and Natalie stepped in. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, her brown hair tied back neatly, her brown eyes full of worry even as she tried to hold on to calm. Sebastian looked at his sister, surprised and exhausted. "I heard," Natalie said, coming to his side. "Marcus called me." Sebastian said nothing. He did not know what to say. Natalie studied him for a long moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But Vivian is my best friend, and I am not going to let her die because of my personal feelings. I will find her," Sebastian said, his voice rough. "I have to find her." Natalie nodded. "Then let me help. I know Volkov has some warehouses in the Eastern Industrial District. She told me about a deal of his that went wrong there last year. Maybe that's where they're hiding Vivian." In the warehouse, Vivian watched Jonathan stand and walk toward the door. He stopped at the threshold, turned back, and looked at her with a cruel smile. "You have 4 more hours to pray that Sebastian will surrender. If not, I will send him each one of your fingers, one by one." The door shut, and Vivian sat alone in the dark, her heart hammering, but her mind still fighting to think. She looked around the room, searching for anything that could help her get out. The rope binding her hands began to loosen slightly as she shifted, and she realized that if she kept rubbing, she might be able to free herself. She thought of Sebastian, of the storm-gray eyes filled with pain and love when he had looked at her that night. She thought of Natalie, of a friendship she did not want to lose. She thought of the life of misfortune she had clawed her way through. From orphanhood to homelessness to being stabbed and nearly dying, she had survived all of it. She would survive this too. "No," she whispered to herself, green eyes burning with determination. "I will not die here. I will not make Sebastian trade everything for me. I will save myself." And she kept scraping the rope against the sharp edge of the chair, not knowing that only a few kilometers away, Sebastian was racing toward her with an entire army behind him. 3 months passed like a dream Vivian did not dare believe was real. The wounds on her wrists had healed, leaving only faint marks beside the older scar on her hip, traces of a past she no longer wanted to run from. She had moved into the penthouse for good. Her sitting room was now filled with paintings she loved. The closet was no longer empty. And every morning she woke in Sebastian's arms, wrapped in the scent of whiskey and sandalwood that had, somehow, become the scent of home. Sebastian was still Sebastian, possessive and controlling in his own way, but he was trying to change, day by day. He no longer had her watched every minute of the day. He had allowed her to return to work at the cafe even though he hated it, and he was learning to ask her opinion instead of issuing orders. Sometimes he still lost control. Sometimes he still burned with wild jealousy when someone looked at her too long, but Vivian had learned how to steady those eruptions, and Sebastian had learned how to apologize when he was wrong. Natalie had come back too, not immediately, but slowly. After the night of the rescue, she began stopping by the penthouse once a week, then twice, then almost every day. The friendship between her and Vivian was no longer what it used to be. It had changed, grown deeper and more adult, rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal and forgiveness. They had talked for hours about everything, about the past, about broken promises, about fear and loss. And eventually, Natalie accepted that Sebastian loved Vivian in a way she had never seen him love anyone, and that Vivian loved Sebastian while knowing exactly who he was and what he had done. Tonight was the opening night of Natalie's new art exhibition, an event she had been preparing for months. The gallery blazed with light, filled with modern paintings and elegant guests. And this time Vivian was not just a quiet helper in the background. She wore an emerald green dress Sebastian had chosen for her, her hair pinned up to reveal the graceful line of her neck, and she stood beside him as an equal, not an invisible shadow. After the exhibition ended and the guests had gone, Sebastian led Vivian up to the rooftop of the gallery building. The city stretched beneath them, lights glittering like a million fallen stars, and the night sky was clear, the silver moon illuminating their faces. A light wind moved past them, and Vivian shivered with cold until Sebastian draped his suit jacket over her shoulders, a gesture so familiar it made her smile. "Why did you bring me up here?" she asked, looking up at him. Sebastian did not answer right away. He studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes so gentle it tightened something in her chest. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. Vivian stopped breathing. "This is not a proposal," Sebastian said, his voice low and serious. "Not yet. I am not worthy of proposing to you. I am still a monster, still a criminal, still everything you should stay away from. But I am trying, every day, to become a man who deserves you." He opened the box, and inside was a simple but breathtaking diamond ring, the stone catching the moonlight like a drop of morning dew. "This was my mother's ring," Sebastian said, his voice turning rough. "She gave it to me before she died and told me I had to give it to the woman I could not live without. I kept it for 15 years, never thinking there would come a day I would let it go, until I met you." "Sebastian," Vivian whispered, tears spilling over. "This is a promise," Sebastian continued, taking the ring out and closing his hand around hers. "A promise that I will spend the rest of my life becoming worthy of you, that I will protect you at any cost, that I will try every day to be better, to control myself more, to love you the right way. And when I have become that man, when I am worthy, I will kneel and propose to you properly." Vivian looked at him, into gray eyes filled with sincerity and fear, and her heart flooded with love until it almost hurt. She remembered everything they had lived through, from the night he saved her on a blood-soaked sidewalk, to the 5 years he loved her from the shadows, to the moment he wept in that warehouse when he thought he had lost her, and she realized she did not want to wait anymore. "And what if I do not want to wait?" she asked, her voice trembling but steady. Sebastian stared at her, confused. "What are you saying?" "I am saying." Vivian stepped closer, pressed her hand to his chest, felt his heartbeat racing beneath the fabric of his shirt. "You do not have to be perfect to propose to me. You do not have to be worthy by your standards. I love you as you are right now, with all the chaos and the darkness and the scars you carry, and I do not want to wait another day." "Vivian," Sebastian breathed, his gray eyes shimmering with something she could not name. "So," she smiled through tears sliding down her cheeks. "Sebastian Kane, will you marry me?" An orphaned girl who was once homeless, with a long scar across her stomach and a heart that has belonged to you since long before she knew it. Sebastian stood there for a long moment, as if he could not believe what he had just heard. Then he laughed, bright and joyful in a way Vivian had never seen on the face that was usually cold. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her under the moonlight, on the highest rooftop in the city. And Vivian knew that her life, for all its pain and loss, had finally found its harbor. 6 months after the rooftop proposal, Vivian stood before the mirror in a pure white wedding dress, and she could not believe the woman looking back at her was truly herself. The gown was simple but elegant, fitted through her body and then falling in a soft flare at the hem. Not overly extravagant, yet enough to make her feel like a princess in a fairy tale she had never dared to dream. Natalie stood beside her, holding the bridesmaid bouquet, brown eyes shining with happy tears. "You look so beautiful, Viv," Natalie whispered, squeezing her friend's hand gently. "Your mother would be so proud if she could see you today." Vivian felt tears rise, but she smiled and held them back. She thought of her parents, of the years of loneliness and pain, of the long road lined with thorns that had brought her to this moment, and she knew that even if they were not here, they were still watching her from somewhere very far away. The wedding took place in the rooftop garden of the penthouse, with only about 30 of the closest guests. Sebastian did not want a grand wedding with hundreds of people he did not care about. He wanted a meaningful ceremony with the people who truly mattered. Marcus stood as his best man, Natalie as her maid of honor, and when Vivian stepped out between the rows of chairs dressed in white flowers, she saw Sebastian at the end of the aisle, storm-gray eyes shimmering with something she could now name. Love, pure and fierce. Their vows were simple, but sincere. Sebastian promised he would protect her at any cost, that he would try every day to become a man worthy of her, that he would love her until his final breath. Vivian promised she would stand beside him in darkness and in light, that she would accept him with every scar and every shadow, that she would be the home he could always return to. And when they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the entire garden erupted in applause, and Natalie cried more than the bride. The next morning, Vivian woke in the familiar bedroom of the penthouse, warm, golden sunlight slipping through the curtains, and she felt Sebastian's arm still wrapped tight around her waist, as it was on every other morning. She lay still for a while, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, feeling the heat of his chest against her back, and breathing in the scent she knew by heart, whiskey and sandalwood, a scent that once made her heart ache every time she caught it, now the scent of home. She remembered the woman of 22 lying on a blood-soaked sidewalk, believing her life would end in that dark alley. She remembered the orphaned girl living in a shelter, with no one in the world to lean on. She remembered the woman who stayed in the shadows as a guest, stealing glances at the man she thought would never even notice she existed. That woman had traveled a long way to reach this place, and Vivian felt proud of herself for never giving up. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian's voice was low and rough with sleep beside her. Vivian turned within his arms, facing the storm-gray eyes that looked at her with all the tenderness in the world. "I'm thinking that I'm home." Sebastian smiled, a smile she now saw every day, and he lowered his mouth to her forehead. "You have always been my home, Vivian. Since the night I held you in my arms on that sidewalk, you are the only home I have ever had." And in a penthouse filled with sunlight, Vivian lay in the arms of the man she loved, the man who had loved her from the shadows for so many years, the man who had saved her life and given her a family. She knew the life ahead would not be perfect. There would still be hardships and trials. There would still be moments when Sebastian lost control and she would have to remind him of his promise. But they would face everything together, as a family, as two broken pieces that had found each other in the dark. Vivian and Sebastian's story is proof of the power of love and resilience. No matter how life pushes you to the very bottom, no matter if you lose everything and feel alone in a wide world, believe that there is always a light waiting for you at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes love comes from the place you least expect, from the person you believed would never see you, from the darkness you fear. If you feel this story has touched your heart, please tap the like button and share this video with the people you love. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss moving stories every day. We would love to know how you feel about this story and whether it reminds you of anything in real life. Leave a comment below to share what is in your heart, and we will read every line. Hello, and see you in the next video. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace in every day. Goodbye, and see you again.